Hi, this is Pat McDonald, your host for Vote for Vermont, where our tagline is listening beyond the soundbites. The boys are not here this evening with me. Ben Kinsley and Eric LaMontagne, they're off doing celebrations for the new year. But I do have with me Jeffrey Tuper-Giles. Giles. God, they just told me not to do that. And Eric Tuper-Giles.
Yes.
Thank you, gentlemen. Let's see. Eric is the director of music at the Barry Congregational Church, which is actually where I first met him. You have known for a while, yes. And the both together are actually managing the Reynolds House bed and breakfast, and we're going to ask them to talk about it, because if you want to go somewhere to run away, that's the place to go, local, and it's absolutely beautiful. So we're wanted to thank you both for coming, because we've been doing a series on racism, discrimination, in Vermont, and I asked Jeffrey and Eric if they would come on and talk about whether they have experienced themselves personally discrimination against the LGBTQIA+. You impressed?
Impressed.
I don't even have to look.
Alphabet Mafia.
Yes, exactly. What they've experienced here in Vermont, so welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I got LGBTQ down, and then I noticed on a show they put IA+. I went, oh, wait a minute. It's taken me a year to do this, but I got it. We have, I'm really good friends with somebody here who you know, Keith Gosselin. Do you know Keith? He does a show, it's called LGBTQ, and he has two women joining him, Linda Quinlan and Ann Charles, and they do a fabulous show. Lots of great guests, and anyway, that's how I
have to check it out.
oh no, he's amazing. He is an amazing, I've known him, oh my God, 20, 30 years, I think. But anyway, why don't you introduce yourselves individually and tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll let you, at the end of the show, we'll wrap it up with the Reynolds House.
Sweet. Go ahead.
Thank you for having us.
You're welcome.
Eric Tuper-Giles, Tuper from the Jeffrey side and Giles from my side. I am originally from Utah, grew up in Mormon country. Oh. And that could be a subject of an entire show on its own.
Come back or stay on. We'll do another hour.
I went to college in New Jersey, so completely, changed where in the country I was living. And then
where did you go to school in New Jersey, the place of my birth?
Westminster Choir College in Princeton.
Oh, excellent.
So that was my big change from the Utah world into New Jersey. My grandmother was terrified because, the entire East Coast is in New York City. And so I was, and I still remember that the summer I was getting ready to come to college, there was a mugging in New York City that happened to have been a Utah person that was going with like his grandmother to a Broadway show. And all of a sudden my grandmother was terrified.
I bet.
I was fine. I thought it was a great place to be.
Yeah, but Princeton in particular, not only is it's just beautiful down there.
Princeton was beautiful. Yeah. Just the sort of that Main Street feel and New England, and just I was away from home and didn't have parents looking after me and stuff like that, and got to be a college kid. But after college, I actually built pipe organs and lived in New Jersey. And long story short, I kind of just got tired of the hustle and bustle. It was great being close to the big cities, but traffic and the bad news all the time. Like you'd start the news and it was always a killing or some tragic sort of thing. So moved up here to Vermont for a change of scenery and have lived in Barry ever since.
And so then you're still working at the church as a choir
Yes. I'm the music director and organist and have been there for almost 20 years.
But go ahead, tell us about yourself.
So I started my life in New York, just outside of Malone, near the Adirondacks.
Nice.
My grandparents actually owned quite a bit of acreage on one of the mountains there. And then when I was 10, my parents got a divorce and my mother moved to South Royalton. And so I was back and forth between South Royalton and New York and the Adirondack section of New York. So I had the best of both worlds. I had like beautiful Vermont and beautiful New York. Right. And at no time did I ever think New York meant the city. Like for me, New York was...
no, upstate New York never thinks of New York
No,
City.
and when you say upstate New York, if you're anywhere below Albany, they think anything above the city is upstate. Well, that's not the case. Right. So when people ask me where I'm from Canada, New York.
Canada. Were you that close? Where were you from?
Right on the border. Like,
okay, because I'm trying to remember where my parents would go every year. right on the water, and we'd see the boats coming from Canada.
Oh, you were probably right on the St. Lawrence River.
Yes, we were.
Yeah. So you were
that's right.
probably right up near Dundee in that area.
Yeah, I'll remember. In the middle of the program, I yell it out because my brain will kick in. But,
Right.
yeah.
And so I grew up there, and then decided when I was a little bit older that I wanted to be in Vermont full time.
Right.
I said I would never move to Barrie because I had heard all of the
Right.
big scary things that happen in Barrie and all of the bad that happens. Well, then I started meeting people. Well, I met Eric, and Eric's like, "Oh, I live in Barrie." I'm like, yeah, not so much. But then I started meeting people like the Bellavances and Tish Rossi, and realized there was a whole different side of Barrie that a lot of people don't talk about or even think about when they think about Barrie. They immediately go to the bad, and they really should look at all the good because there is a lot of good.
Yeah.
And then, and here I am, settled.
Here you are.
Yeah.
Well, good. How did you two meet?
Well,
sounds like in Vermont somewhere.
Well, we actually met online. I lived in Tunbridge, and he lived in Barrie, and we talked for a year and a half before we met in person.
Excellent.
It was just I wasn't looking for a relationship. I was like over people in general.
Yeah.
He was still kind of in a end of a bad relationship, or it got bad. And then, so we talked for a year and a half, and then we went on our first date on February 9th, I believe it was. Oh, so many years
But who
ago.
remembers? That's great.
And then he came over on Valentine's Day. I cooked for him the first time, which was a disaster, and I should never be allowed in the kitchen. I know how to burn water.
True story.
Sad, but true.
And then he came over on Valentine's Day with spaghetti and homemade meatballs, and that's become our tradition ever since. So every Valentine's Day we have spaghetti and homemade meatballs.
Nice.
And I can actually help cook, so.
That's good. You need to learn a little, guys.
Oh, I know.
If guys put their mind to it, they're better chefs than
I can
ladies.
cook. I have this problem where I'll start to cook something, and I'll get distracted.
You
and walk
forget
away.
while it's burning?
Yes, and I'll walk away. And one day I literally was cleaning a cast iron frying pan, and I couldn't get some stuff off it, so I put a little bit of water in it, put it on the stove, and I walked away and burnt all of the.
Been there, done that.
Yeah, took all the seasoning off of it. Yeah.
Cool. I'm good while I'm cooking. It's after, and I forget to turn the stove off. And now Bruce and I have this thing. Did you turn the stove on? And I don't get mad or think it's because I've asked him to please remind me, because that's an age thing, but not you. So there you go. So, and you two got married. Did you get married in Barrie?
We did. We were
love that church.
First gay couple married at the Barrie Congregational Church, because we had to go through the open and affirming process at the church.
Right.
Which I'm now the Vermont coordinator for the conference.
Oh, great.
So I'm the O&A coordinator for the conference, which when you asked me to do this, I was like, oh, this is cool, because I talk a little bit about that too.
Yes,
yeah,
please do.
What I do with the church is to help kind of guide them and help them through
well,
it.
even when we moved from Berlin to Barrie, Reverend oh my God, I love him to death. David, I know David part, but then I was trying to get respectful on the, He immediately told us about the open and affirming and what that meant, and so just wanted to let us know, which worked for us. So that's good. That's a great church.
It's a lovely church.
And I have not met the new minister, but
she's amazing.
Is she? I've listened to her. I've been on the TV.
So you've watched my videos.
So
that I
I've
put
watched
together.
your videos. Are you the in charge person? Very good for you. All right. So we were going to talk about whether individually and together, whether you've experienced discrimination in Vermont. And while we know it's pretty much everywhere, and if you listen to the LGBTQ show on TV with Keith and the two women, they spend half of the show, I think, talking about outside of Vermont. And whoa, especially foreign countries, the ones we're giving all that money to in the in the COVID relief fund, not being political or anything, but seriously.
Well, I've actually seen videos which are stuck in my head now, and I just happened on one day. That they will actually behead people still for being gay.
Yep, off the top of a roof. And,
and it's legal.
Yeah.
I have a friend in London who is, his dad's from Nigeria, and he was born in London, but he's Nigerian, and he's a pastor, and he's got a law degree and all of this stuff. And his father actually helped pass laws in Nigeria, knowing that he had a gay son, that you can get jailed for 14 years just for being gay. And if you go to jail for being gay, most of the time you end up dead.
And Dad was okay with this?
And Dad was fine with it.
Lovely.
Yeah. And it appalls me that when I think about certain things, I know we'll get to this later about parents especially.
Yeah, right.
And I know we'll talk about
Well, we had, I'm not going to mention who, what, or where, but when they were looking at the gay marriage bill, a couple of legislators who were against it, their kid, one of their kids came out and said, I'm gay. And so they sort of changed their vote because they couldn't vote against their kids. So sort of shame on this guy here.
Yeah.
How do you do that?
Well, CNN actually did a story on them in 2008.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's how big this was. Like,
well, it's just, sometimes I hear things on this show that just blow my mind. I look like a deer in headlights sometimes, like, what, really?
well, I'm part of this private Facebook group. It's called Home for the Holidays. And it's basically a safe space for people to talk about their experiences. And the number of stories that I read about parents who are kicking their kids out, like they have no place to stay, what are they going to do? I'm like, it befuddles me. And I know you've experienced this, so we come from very different sides of this, well, sort of different sides, but I'll let him talk about his story.
Right. Well, whatever you'd like to share, and as far back as you'd like to go, because I would like to talk about your concerns, which I know you have from talking to you, about the kids and the youth, and where can they go, and who can they talk to, and so why don't you just jump right in?
All right. Well, why don't we talk a little bit about Eric's backstory, because this really kind of drives where I'm going with some of my stuff.
Take it away.
Well, as I mentioned, I grew up in conservative Mormon country.
Right.
And I've always known I was gay. I mean, it wasn't really something that I'm not an overly flamboyant person. I'm who I am, and it's the way I've been here in Vermont too. Like it's different for me. But I decided to come out to my parents because we were one of those big sprawling Mormon families, and
I missed that. You were Mormon.
I was
you
Mormon.
have to come back on my show.
Okay.
Sorry, the questions are like, oh my God.
So
I used to practice at the Mormon Tabernacle.
Oh, lovely.
So I after college decided that it would be best if I came out to my family. I figured my mom had said things during college, I'm glad you have such a close friend that you can go see his family and that takes care of you when you're not doing well and stuff. So, I mean, these are all pretty clear things that mom knows what's going on. So I flew home for my little brother's 4th birthday. Figured it would be a surprise. He was born when I was in high school still, and so flew home to surprise. And I learned another thing on that trip, that you don't surprise your grandparents doing that, because I think I just about gave my grandparents heart attacks when you go walk. Here you are, 2,500 miles away,
and there he comes.
Here I am. But so at the very end of my trip, I finally had the courage to come out to my parents, and it went terribly. And to this day, we still are not close. They both,
don't they? I'm sorry, but just being you, and wouldn't they have sensed that, or that's a religion that doesn't really think about it much?
I think it's a religion that doesn't think about it, but I also think people like to hide behind religion as an excuse for dealing with uncomfortable things. When you've got a group around you that can, but the Mormons are all about families and that sort of stuff, so it still boggles my mind. But they both wrote me beautiful letters a couple weeks later explaining how and why they couldn't accept this, and that once I changed, I was welcome back. But that was that. In fact, I have not been back to Utah since. I was told not to tell my brothers and sisters, and so they grew up thinking they were told by my parents that I just disappeared and didn't want anything to do with the family.
Oh.
So, and I can deal with that side. It bothers me now that my grandmother passed away thinking that, because we were very, very close.
Right.
So that's the side of it that hurts. But then I got thrown for a loop when I reconnected with my family. My brother Trevor, that I had flown home to see when he was turning 4, he was now, I think, 20 when we finally reconnected, thanks to Jeffrey. But he, after we talked and daily on the phone, came out to me with his secret, and I'm the oldest of the family, so I figured I was ready to big brother any problem that any younger sibling had. Trevor came out as trans and has now since transitioned and had surgery and is now Tara. So that one completely threw me for a loop. Here was Big Brother prepared to tackle anything, and that was, and as a gay person, that was one thing that I just it wasn't that I was uncomfortable with, I just didn't know anything about it. I felt completely clueless, having to be the one asking questions and trying to understand. So sadly, Tara has had the same exact response from my family, only she still lives in Utah in the same town as my family, and so it's a little harder for them to...
That must be very hard for her.
Yeah.
I mean, she must see them.
She doesn't...
tries, but
she
they
tries.
don't.
Oh, they don't want to.
So,
Well,
we in
I
fact...
have to talk about because I am clearly... some of this is fairly new. So if I say something stupid, just call me out.
Well, I don't think it's saying something stupid. You're actually doing the right thing by educating yourself.
Well, I do try that. I mean, people, and as a matter of fact, when I used to testify, I used to say preference when I would testify, because I was head of human resources. You'd think I'd know this. And Keith Brosling was the one, after I testified in front of House Judiciary, he said, come here. I said, what? He goes, you can't use the word preference because it's not a choice. It's an orientation. That's what you are oriented towards. So, I've had people in my face yelling at me, but because Keith took time to explain it and I understood it, so I don't use that word. I was even struggling trying to come up with it, because I think people don't take the time to explain. I don't think most people are trying to be mean. They just don't know. It's just stupid. I mean, you know.
Well, it goes back to, it makes me think of, like, for instance, it used to be okay to say colored people.
Oh, right, for sure.
And there's just different things as time goes on that we learn, and so would I expect my 80-year-old aunt to be like,
yeah, right.
No, like, she's going to say things that aren't necessarily politically correct, or will make your skin crawl, but at the same time, you can't be upset by it, because that's what they knew. That's what they learned.
Sure, that's how we were brought up.
Right.
I mean, we just learned those words and things, and I think people if you just sit down and explain and not be mad about it, just explain, people will, oh, thank you, and off you go. I had a thing on Keith's show one time. I walked in, I had a show after his, and he had a lot of drag queens on who were more attractive than I, may I say, so we didn't hit it off right from the beginning. But anyway, I don't know, I said something, and one of the ladies sat me down and said, "Dear, let me explain something." And she did the same thing that Keith did years ago. And I said, "Oh, thank you." So learned and moved on.
Yeah, it really is just about, like, taking the time to be compassionate and educate yourself, and not being just completely obnoxious to people.
Right.
Like, if you just genuinely treat people with respect,
Right. Exactly.
Most time people will come up to you and say the things. Oh, you know what? It's not a preference, and that makes it sound like a choice. Those things that we.
I mean, that was the word everybody used. It's it's his preference. And so when you said that's not a choice, and once you understand that, you go with orientation, or maybe they've even changed the word now. I don't know, but that's when I was testifying back, maybe 8-10 years ago.
No, it's still sexual orientation.
So when you came to Vermont, what experiences did you have in our fair state?
I have to say I've been very lucky in Vermont
Yeah.
for the most part. I was here. I remember the whole civil union debate and the ugliness of that. In fact, it's one of the few times I was really interested in what was going on in the state and actually went to the State House. I remember being packed in the gallery up top and hearing some very emotional testimony given and seeing that process play out. I remember all the Take Back Vermont signs and stuff like that.
It's a great marketing campaign.
Oh, I know. And you still see signs. There's a couple of them painted on barns
Yes.
around Vermont that aren't coming down.
Makes me think we need to buy more maple syrup.
Well,
really.
that's what they actually thought it was. People from out of state thought it was a marketing campaign to take back more maple syrup, but it was not.
And it was an odd time because Vermont tends to be that live and let live sort of, like you're there for your neighbor when they need help, but you stay out of their business.
Right.
Like, and I think that's one of the things I really enjoy most about Vermont is that sort of community
Live
that
and
we
let
have.
live, right?
But when I first moved to Vermont, I didn't have a church job, and I practiced at St. Monica's Church. Had no problems there. I was friends with a teen that was kicked out of St. Monica's school for being gay, which I.
When was this? This must have been a long time ago.
Yeah,
right?
this was
They were the
a
first
while
started back in
ago.
the 60s.
This was
20 years ago.
Yeah, this has been sometime late
sure can't
90s sort of
happen
a thing. And then I worked at the Episcopal Church for a while, and then I upgraded church jobs to the to the Congregational Church because they had a pipe organ.
Right.
That was a great draw there,
that's right.
and I didn't give it a thought about being gay and employed at a church. Yet this is kind of a big deal, and it was a couple years later that the pastor pulled me aside and told me the story of what went on when I was hired. And I'm kind of glad I didn't know some of this because I wouldn't have developed the same relationships. They had discussions about me behind closed doors, whether they could hire a gay person to be the organist. And they finally decided that I could be the organist since at the Congregational Church, the organist sits up behind the wall.
I think you're going to go, really? Behind the wall?
So since I was up there, this is the one that makes me cringe though. As long as I had no contact with kids in the church, I could be the organist. And how outdated is that
Oh my
particular
God, that's
thinking?
just not even, I hope nobody's even thinking that anymore. I mean, that's just like wrong.
I hope no one is, but
I'm very surprised about the
Psychology
open
101.
and,
yeah.
Psychology 101
Yeah.
tells you that it's straight hetero men who are the most
for sure, no,
active pedophiles
I think
because
most of us get that.
it's a power trip. It's
Yeah.
not. It has
Well,
nothing to do with
that
sexuality.
discussion came up when people started to adopt, couples started to adopt.
Yep.
That was the same discussion that they had. Do you want the kids to grow up like dad or like mom, whatever the situation is? And
What, loved by two parents, like modeling
Right,
that behavior.
right.
That's
I
a terrible
actually
thing.
think if a child, if you're in a loving home, it's certainly better than some of the other accommodations that that these kids
Accommodations, yeah.
that the kids can be
Yep.
brought up in.
Yep.
I mean, so what's the deal? If they're loved, who cares?
Yeah. So I'm proud of the Congregational Church.
Yeah.
They've grown a lot over the years.
You're allowed out now.
And we were the first married couple.
Sorry.
Oh yeah.
So
that's what-
I'm proud of that, and I think that Vermont probably has followed that same sort of trajectory where I know from listening to those civil unions discussions, there were a lot of people that had those same outdated sorts
Yeah,
of
right.
sorts of thoughts. But it was odd. We even had support with folks who knew gay people. Like I know a gay person. So, but I still feel this way that it's wrong. But I think part of it, you put a face to it and you get to know somebody,
Right.
which we've already been talking in this show that I think a lot of that would go a long way in our political world right now if some folks could just sit down and realize we're all human beings. let's recognize the problems and solve them and not argue whether the sky's blue or not.
We're going to get there because it can't go on like this anymore. You can't keep doing this blame game and, and blah, 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 back and forth. It's like, you want to just yell something I can't yell on TV. Just stop, stop.
Yeah.
It'll stop. It has to. Well, that's great. Anything else you wanted to add before we turn to the better half?
No, I've been lucky here in Vermont.
Yeah.
I didn't have a problem with housing when I first moved here. I admit I was nervous about it and wondered how I would explain this to a landlord.
That is an issue here from my research anyway.
Yep,
Yeah.
But I didn't experience the problem with it. It's the only other real experience I've had where I realized that this is still an issue in Vermont. When the Reynolds House renovations were going on and we were dealing with contractors, we were fine with them, but later on heard that they were initially concerned working with us because they didn't know how to interact with gay people. And
just hi.
I'm like, well, just like you would anybody else. Right. I know that when I was at CVTV, I worked with a lot of different people, and if there was ever any uncomfortable side, it was more that I don't fit into that guys club sort of thing. So, but that could happen to anybody. Right. But still, there's just maybe an automatic assumption, oh, he's gay, and so, well, I'm not going to make suggestive, dirty jokes, and I won't talk about hunting and sports and a whole bunch.
Beer at the bar with the boys.
So it's still, there's some of that, good old boys club feel at times, but I've been lucky.
That's good. I've actually found, and I'm assuming you have not been too involved in the court system, but when we've done shows on is there racism in Vermont, I think some of the shows have pointed to the court system. And do you hear from people that you may know in the gay community whether that's an issue here?
I haven't heard anything about that.
Because I know a lot of people in the court systems.
Yeah, well, because, certainly with the folks that I've interviewed, they've been very specific about what's happened to them or their friends or whatever in the courts. And that upsets me.
It's upsetting because that's where the systemic racism is built
right
into the law.
Exactly.
Which sucks.
Yeah. See, that's what at the end of the show when everybody said it's great, and then somehow one show came right down to it's the courts and systemic racism.
Yep.
And that was it, and that's what needs to be changed. Anyway. So do you want to tell us a little about yourself?
Sure. I've experienced a little bit of weirdness when it comes to being gay in Vermont. A lot when I was younger from girls. And it was like when I was a teenager, just late teens coming out. But it wasn't, I don't believe it was necessarily based directly at me. It was directly at me, but it was more that they were jealous that the guys I was hanging out with weren't hanging out with them. So, this one girl said something, and I don't know if I can say it on TV, but I'll say it and you can edit it out if I can't.
All right. Pay attention to this, where it is on the show.
But she was like, silly chicks. And I was like, excuse me? And that's when I started to really learn how to become snarky and how to turn on my inner bitch. Because I was like, you're just jealous I'm getting more than you are. And that shut down the conversation in a hurry.
This was in high school?
Just after high school,
yeah. Oh, okay.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yeah. And then I didn't really I didn't really notice it as much because I ended up surrounding myself with people who were like me or friends of LGBTQ. So I stopped seeing it as much because I moved to Burlington from South Royalton. And then when I was in Burlington, I was hooked up with Outright Vermont and went to high schools. And a group of us would go and talk as a panel to high school students about what it's like to be gay. And back then, I used to tell kids, look, when you come out, be prepared for all of your family and all of your friends to walk away from you and be ready to be alone for a while. And that's kind of where you and I were talking before about what I feel like. I feel it's sad that I would have to say something like that. in my work life, I've had a couple of managers who were just one when I lived in Burlington was like, "Could you not be so gay at work?"
Yeah, turn that right off.
And I'm like, what does that
Yeah.
even mean?
Right.
Well, if you go out on a date the night before, nobody wants to know where you went to dinner with a guy. But I want to hear about like where you took this woman to go do things that we were not like you're so much more descriptive about your dates.
Right.
And like it was weird. And then I've had another manager who said, "Oh, gay men just have way more drama."
Maybe not.
Yeah, that's your perception.
Right.
Like, so no. But overall, no, because quite frankly, I walk away most like.
Good for you.
I don't see it because I try to choose not to see it.
Yeah.
Like, and one of the things, like, there are people who will be like, "Oh, did they do that to you because you were gay?" And quite frankly, most gay people don't even think that. That's like the furthest thing from our mind.
Well, I mean, seriously, that's kind of good to hear that that's not
Like
right
that's,
out front, and they're living with it. Living with them, I mean, they are, but they're not making a thing about it, which is good.
yeah, no, I mean, I've had people say, "Oh, did they do that because you were gay?" And I'm like,
Wow.
I didn't. That wasn't even like the
Right.
like that doesn't come into for me. It doesn't come into
Right.
play. But for straight people who see like what happens, they're like, "Oh, like maybe that's the reason."
But
And I'm like,
you both are very comfortable with you,
yes,
with who you are, and that comes across a lot. And I could tell on the air that because I met you in church, I changed my mind a lot about the issue about gay marriage, and it was because I met you both, and that's a true story. I even told David that, now that I remembered his first and last name. But that was true because there you were in church, and you're on the council, and I mean, really, you're just regular folk.
that's the thing that I think for too long, and I think TV had a lot to do with it, because for a very long time, the only gay characters you saw on TV were these really flamey, like almost caricatures of people. They weren't. I mean, of course, stereotypes are there because for a reason, but every gay character you saw on TV from the 80s through the early 2000s was a joke, really. I mean, they weren't real people.
No.
They were there for comic relief, or they were there to make a point, like a very serious point. Like
they were often a villain and a sinister person. So it was either.
Oh, interesting.
I'm trying to think of specific examples. I might shout it out at some point during the show. As you
great.
said.
Well, I'll have
Still working on
We're just
that.
trying to shout things out.
things out.
But so you think of the stereotypical flamboyant person, like think of like watching Hollywood Squares. So some of the great comedians of the time.
Yeah.
So that was one way of doing it, but then you had the villain side. They were the bad guy. They were the less desirable character, and we've come a long way now. In fact, in some ways, I'm a bit envious of the kids growing up now that don't have to have this discussion of
Parents throwing coming out parties. Come on.
Oh, is that true?
That is so
No
true.
kidding. That's cool.
Yeah.
Growing up, although I knew I was gay, I didn't know necessarily what it was. And my first seeing what this was seeing AIDS as a news story in the 80s.
Oh, in the
and
gay
so,
community.
So here you are, a kid that now you already know you're different, and now all you hear about this is the bad thing, that this is something you're going to die from because you're gay. And so to still grow up through that, and kids nowadays aren't growing up with that sort of bad news. I mean, there are gay characters on TV, there are role models out there, they're not just characters, but there's people in Hollywood and there's people in the news media and sports people that the gay kids can look at and see that, oh, it's possible for me to have a normal relationship with somebody and be married and lead the life I want to lead with somebody that I want to be with, and that there aren't necessarily these expectations of cookie cutters of, oh, you're this person, you have to marry this person, and those sorts of things.
I know one of the newspaper reporters that I knew who was gay, and his partner was very sick and in the hospital, and he couldn't make decisions, and that was, I think, the sort of the turning point about what I thought about it all, because I said, that's just wrong. If this is who you're with, who you love, who you decided to spend your life with, they weren't married, they were together, but he couldn't make any decisions unless there was a legal contract stating that, this person was the, whatever the legal term is, to make him be able to make decisions. But I thought, no, that's who this person chose to live with, and that's the deal. That upset me to no end.
Yeah.
Before gay couples could get married, you had to have a power of attorney, you had to have all of these legal paperwork, and hospitals could still deny you going in and seeing,
even if you had the paperwork?
Even if you had the paperwork, because you weren't immediate family.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that part. That's great.
And so, yeah, I mean, thankfully we've come a long way. I mean, there's still probably a long way to go.
Well, one thing I think is, speaking of examples, are in the State House, we have quite a few openly gay people who are just so professional and so influential in the State House. And, those guys are real role models. And women now. We have Becca Bly, she's going to be the Speaker of the House. No, Senate Pro Tem, excuse me. And she's openly gay, and she was just being interviewed the other day. I was going to try to get her on the show. It would be nice when we get to a place where I introduce you as you, period, without all the qualifiers. Same with I was talking to one of them on the show, and I said, I'd like to dislike you just because you're a pain in the ass, not be called racist because you're black. Why can't I not like you? And I said, I'd be afraid to say I don't like you because somebody turn around and say I'm racist. I said, but maybe I really don't like you because, you're a bad person or something. What's wrong with that?
Yeah.
Just say, I don't like you. Anyway, I wanted to talk the time we have left about the young people that you are very interested in. And there is another show on this channel. It's LGBTQ Young Edition, I think they call it. Youth Edition, and they have 3 young women who just from high school talk about their issues. And I was listening to one this morning where they were talking about pronouns, about how they talk about themselves rather than she, he, but some of the things they all have problems, like you said, and maybe different than what you both experience, but they're still there. And kids, God bless them. If they've got something to pick on to make your life miserable, they will. And with me, I was 6 foot in 8th grade. Hello. That was a long high school, 4 years, may I say. But what can I do about that? This is it, folks. Sorry. But they found that was my Achilles heel, and they just never let me forget it. So if you're gay in school, or these kids were talking about it, and I think it's great that they have a place to go where they can talk and be led by an adult who maybe can steer them in the right direction as far as analyzing what they're dealing with.
Well, so for instance, like you and I have talked about, like, youth need a place to go feel safe. We actually got a phone call at the Reynolds house. I'm going to skip back because it relates, but we got a phone call. We fly a rainbow flag at the Reynolds house. We got a phone call. You should probably take that flag down. Why? Well, because it's a political statement. It's not a political statement. It's a statement that everyone is welcome no matter who they are.
Right.
So, well, aren't you afraid that you're going to lose business over that flag? Okay, but I'm back to everybody's welcome.
Right.
And quite frankly, if someone doesn't stay here because of that flag,
we don't want them.
I probably didn't want them staying in the first place because they would have said something or done something that was outrageous. Now, that being said, that same flag, we got a message on Facebook from a woman you probably know, Bernadette, and she sent me a message that she had signs outside of her house, and a young man stopped and said, saw that somebody had ruined one of her signs and asked if he could remake it, and said, I feel very safe when I come by here because I see these signs and they're so inclusive and I love it. And then brought up to her the Reynolds house, and that he feels safe when he walks by the Reynolds house and feels safer in Barrie now.
See, good for you.
Because people are flying the rainbow flags, and
Right.
and there are places that he knows are safe places if something happens. And so I feel like the more we do, like our churches now, the Methodist Church, our church, the Presbyterian Church, they all fly rainbow flags. And to show that, we're including people.
Right.
And one of the things I tell churches when I work with them on this issue is just because you put up a rainbow flag does not mean you're going to get an influx of gay people coming to your church. Because quite frankly, gay people have been so marginalized by the church and so discriminated against by the church that most of them, it's going to take a lot of years to repair that particular bit of damage. And quite frankly, you don't see in the news the churches that are doing the good things for the LGBTQIA community. What you're seeing is people like Westboro Baptist, and you're seeing the negative side. In the news, for whatever reason, we tend to focus on the negative, and that's where...
Yeah, those people shouldn't, I know they have the right, blah, 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 but somebody should do something. They're a pretty disrespectful gang.
I look at that and think, they're gonna go up to God and be like, I did your work, and God's gonna be like,
I
yeah,
don't think
no.
so. No, not about our soldiers and their death. That's pretty sad.
You missed the point.
Yeah. So if I would suggest you just take a look at this show, because the kids that are on there are just so open. I mean, they'll just say that. In some cases, as a mother, the darndest thing. Like, but I understand why, and good for them, and they're very comfortable talking about their issues.
So kids, I've noticed now, like when I go, and the younger generations of the churches that I work with don't even care anymore.
No, they'll just
and a lot of them understand that yes, they may have a sexual orientation, but that they're more likely to fall in love with a person based on the person and not the person's gender.
That's exactly. I wrote this woman's name, Sophia Flora. I want her on my show. She said the exact thing, that she's not. Her sexuality is sort of across the board. I mean, she'll like you and be with you because of who you are.
Yep.
And I thought, whoa, that's a statement.
And more kids are getting to that point. Like I had a conversation with a young man who is still in high school. We've known him since he was young, but we were talking one day and he said, "Oh, and I had my first time." And he told me a little bit about like not what happened, but how it happened and stuff. And I was like, okay. But he also understands that he doesn't have to be just stuck with one gender or the other.
Right.
I'm like, and the more I hear this, and the more I'm like, I thought, like we came out, we had it rough, but not as rough as the people in the 60s who came out, or before. I mean, and I read stories and look at stories like Rock Hudson, and watch
To live his whole life in secret,
Yeah.
and being a famous person. I mean, that's hard.
And the number of Hollywood people that do that. In fact, Zachary Quinto, he was on the show Save the Cheerleader, Save the World. I can't think of the name of the show. Heroes or something like that. And then also in Star Trek, he played, in the newer Star Treks, he plays the Vulcan.
Oh, yes, I know who. Yep,
Okay, so Zachary Quinto wasn't going to come out of the closet to the public because he was like, I won't get acting jobs and things like that.
Leading man roles will be gone, right?
Well, then he realized that because the rate of LGBTQ teen suicide is 3 times that of their straight counterparts.
Which is high enough in Vermont. We're one of the leading teen suicide states in the nation. We have very high, compared to our small population, but it's out of control.
So the straight kids are killing themselves 3 times less than the gay kids, and he was like, I can't not come out. I need these kids to know that there are role models, and that there are people out there who can help them and make it in life. And that's where I was going with this whole, like, I would rather see one kid run inside a church and say, I need safe harbor, than just feel so desperate that they have to kill themselves.
I can't even imagine in your head in my head being there. If that's your solution, something's really wrong
Well,
with us, with the world.
transgendered kids who feel like they're stuck in the wrong body, their suicide rate is, I think, 8 times that of
Oh my God.
the straight counterparts.
Oh, I didn't. Oh, that's really terrible.
Transgendered people are murdered at a rate that's like 6 or 8 times higher than just
Yep.
anyone else. In fact, they're targeted. When I was in Puerto Rico on my mission trip, this transgendered person who had some schizophrenia problems, but was murdered while I was there, and there were big protests on the governor's mansion and stuff in Puerto
right.
Rico because the person would always carry a mirror and look behind them because they were afraid
Afraid
of.
somebody was going to sneak up on them?
Yep,
Wow.
and they were in a bathroom, in a public bathroom, and they had their mirror, and because they heard the door, and that's all it took. And these people actually videotaped themselves killing this person, and then got on a plane and left Puerto Rico.
Was that a long while ago?
No,
or
that was
it?
last February.
Oh, you're kidding. Oh.
Yeah.
See, now I don't know, I just assume that we've
No.
all grown up a little.
No,
Guess not.
and to see the outpouring of, like, I went to the vigil. I left the group and went to the vigil for a little while, and by the time I was done, I was crying
Yeah,
because
for sure.
because the friends of this person who were just like, she just was scared, like
Yeah,
she was
yeah.
always just scared of people and everything, and no wonder.
For sure.
So
Wow.
so it's just it makes me sad that we even have to have these conversations, that we
Yeah.
can't just let people be themselves. And
That'll be the good world when we can do that without saying, oh, and they're gay, and oh, this, and oh, that. Just, it's Eric, and there you go.
and when do we get to that point, though? I mean, at what point do we stop teaching our kids racism and stop teaching our kids homophobia?
Right.
Because kids don't just
Well, they learn it at home first.
exactly.
Because I have a few, as much as I adored my dad, he didn't talk about it much, but every once in a while something would come out, and I'd be very, very shocked. That really?
Growing up, Utah is a very non-diverse state.
Right.
But I didn't really experience racism. But the funny thing for me, I grew up, we didn't talk about it because we didn't have to. And so it wasn't something I was exposed to. And then when I went to college in New Jersey, so my parents drove across the country. We drove in our Ford minivan across the country. My sisters stayed with my grandparents, and the boys all piled in the car, and we drove for 3.5 days across the country. Stayed in
That
motel
alone
rooms.
would.
And so a little funny side part of the story, the muffler fell off our minivan on the Pennsylvania Turnpike. So my first trip into downtown Princeton with my parents, which you know how that is as a college kid,
Right.
you're embarrassed enough,
Yeah.
was with our loud Ford Aerostar driving down
With the
the
muffler.
street. So got onto campus. Now this is a music school, so obviously there are going to be more gay people here. And I had not met my roommate yet. I had no idea who they were. I just knew they were from New Jersey. His name was Kevin. Okay, so I walk into my dorm room and it's a black kid. I don't remember thinking anything of it other than I had never imagined it being a black person
Right.
because I really, to be honest, had never.
From where you come from, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't have any black friends. Wasn't a big deal for me.
Yeah.
Like we were good friends. I could just, wasn't an issue. But I wondered what my parents thought of it because, you know, we didn't watch the Cosby Show and stuff because we just didn't watch black people.
Right.
So I wondered about what they were thinking. Well, my roommate, Kevin, later told me his side of the story. His mom was terrified of him going to college with gay people because she was terrified that her son would be around some gay person and this gay person would hit on them and all
Right.
sorts of those scary things. So, in fact, when they were on campus that day, I apparently looked gay. And she pointed out that she was afraid that I was going to, as a gay person,
Right.
influence her
Right.
innocent
Right.
son. So my parents were surely shocked that I had a black roommate, and his parents were just as shocked that it was me. So it was a win-win. Both of us, shocked our parents that day and stuff.
Wow.
So
well, it obviously turned out just lovely. You guys became friends, and
we were friends, and I just thought that was so funny that I was the scary thing in his life, and that perhaps he was the scary thing in my parents.
Maybe someday that won't be.
Because
Because something happened the other day on TV, and I thought, why do you have to say that? Why can't you just say this is Joe Blow, Carpenter, whatever? I mean, why do you have to put all the adjectives on it? Okay, so let's just kind of move on. I have some notes here that I was just talking about the laws in Vermont, and personally, I think that we've done a lot of things in law that maybe other states haven't. I think we've been fairly, maybe I'm wrong because I don't know stand it from your point of view, but it seems to me we've done a lot of good things in our laws to recognize the issues that you may deal with and what needs to be fixed. You mentioned housing, and I mean there's a whole lot of things that we have addressed, and I think we were the first state to pass a comprehensive statewide law prohibiting sexual orientation, discrimination. That was way back in 1992, which, and I think we've built on it. Have you been involved in things that you would like to see changed in our laws? Are there things still, there's probably things still out there that could be tweaked a little here and there?
The only thing that I would tweak, and this is a bigger issue than just LGBTQ, but the at-will employment.
Oh, talk about that. What?
Because if someone doesn't like you because you're gay, and you can tell that that's the problem, well, they can still fire you and just give you some bogus reason that it wasn't.
They know how to do that.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think I believe an at-will state is not necessarily the best, because I think that I think more employers would invest more in their employees if they knew they had to have cause and had to have documented cause. I think they would work with their employees more to help them become part of the culture that they expect them to be, versus just, you're disposable, I'll get the next person.
Yeah, so that's very interesting, because in my mind, I'd like to be able to fire you just because you're a bad employee, and not have anything thrown back at me that said, oh, you're not really firing me for that, you're firing me because I'm gay. But that's really, I've never thought about it that way.
But put yourself in the other position.
Yeah, no, for sure. Because if you haven't been, a lot of employers don't do what they're supposed to do by counseling and giving warnings and 1 or 2 warnings and all that stuff. So a lot of times it's a big surprise when you walk into your boss's office and you're.
Yep.
And so what would you think? If nobody's told you your performance is bad, you're going to go to the thing you know best. So.
Yep.
That's interesting. You should participate in some of the conversations if they bring it up again, because that's always an issue that comes up.
Every few years.
Every few years it comes up. Because I think we've really, I'm just looking at the list of gender identity, sexual orientation, HIV status, crime victim, which I think the HIV status, if I may, you were talking about that isn't still, that's gone, because it's everybody. It's everybody and anybody these days. So is that stuck with being gay? That's a HIV thing?
I don't think it is, other than I just still hear the and I know they're changing this now to make it easier for gay men to donate blood, but that's the one thing where I do think of that as being kind of an odd.
They have changed that rule.
But it's still this, like,
it's still a weird
because you may have HIV or
because I'm gay, it would mean that
and
that's sort of, I think, an outdated, odd leftover
because I think it's gone way beyond just that one population of people.
So here's the thing. Back in it started in the 80s. The first article written was in 1984 in the New York Times. I could be wrong about the year, but it was called "The Gay Cancer." Was the title of the article.
I was in New York City about them. That rings a bell.
So it was called The Gay Cancer, and it was full of just misnomer. Like, they didn't know anything. So they just wrote what they thought they knew. And then in the early to mid 90s, straight black men actually had a higher rate of HIV
Really?
than gay men did, because gay men learned really quick.
You'd be protected, right?
Protect yourself,
Yeah.
because this is running rampant. And
Right.
and I mean, if you think about it, in the late 80s, so many people lost so many friends,
Yeah,
and everybody was dying, that they all just like
Right.
banded
Well,
together.
I worked at Elizabeth Arden Corporation for years, and a lot of people that work there in the salons, the hairdressers and stuff, there were a lot of gay people in that whole environment.
What?
That it was,
No.
Huh? Yes. I
Gay
know it's
hairdressers?
I know it's a shock. But
And at
Count
the time,
Pablo
though,
Zappi Manzoni was my favorite.
the government wasn't doing anything to help this problem. And so I think that was actually to me, it shows the strength that exists inside the gay community at protecting itself and looking after itself, because here was this scary thing that no one really understood at the time. The government wouldn't even talk about it unless it was a story on the news that something bad was going on. But you had Ronald Reagan that wasn't really keen on making this a big thing.
Right. And
And
there was no cure back then.
No.
Now it's not a cure, but there's medication that can stabilize it and keep people going until.
So now it's basically, now they've got it to the point where if you're undetectable, you can't, you actually aren't able to pass it along.
Oh.
So they've got it to the point, and they've got new drugs like I don't even know the name of them, but there's some new drugs out there that you can take that actually help prevent you from getting it.
Oh, you're kidding.
No, but there isn't a cure. The problem with these drugs, though, they're finding is it decimates your bones. Like there's a lot of
You'll die from the medicine, but anyway. So we've been talking a little bit about employment and employers, and I did a lot of research on their responsibilities for advertising, interviewing, training, promotions, pay. I mean, it just goes on forever. It's just treating people equally, right from the get-go for looking for people. But I think. I live in a vacuum, so I have to rely on you, because I really do. Sometimes people tell me things, I'm like, what? This is Vermont. What do you see, when you're looking at ads and stuff, do things trigger for you that ad should be rewritten and is really focused on excluding rather than including?
for employment and
for employment, because that was a big thing when most of my life I've done employment stuff and done benefits, and right from when we've had federal laws that you have to be very careful what you say, so that you're not excluding people, and that did happen. I mean, a lot. It happens in training. This whole list I just read, it just happens. And as you said before, they're very clever in finding every reason but, and they used to do it. That was just the deal.
Well, I think that if an employer is going to find a reason,
They'll find it.
If they can't because you're gay, there's enough other ways that they can justify this.
Right.
And I think that's the bigger problem, that we're on your show talking as two gay people about our experience in the world, yet part of that experience in the world, we wish that didn't need to be a discussion. Like you said, get rid of all the other labels
all
for
the
us.
adjectives, why do you need them?
I had a friend who, his way about being gay, yes, I'm gay, but there's at least 10 other things that are more interesting about me that I would like you to know before you know that one thing.
What a great approach.
And I think that all of us across the board in everything in society would be much better if we stopped labeling with those obvious things. Stop using that as the label. And you mentioned earlier about the younger teens and stuff, and their lively discussions and this discussion about pronouns and stuff. And I know I hear a lot of grumbling about pronouns. Why do we need to talk about whether it's he or she or they or those sorts of things? Yet that's how we are currently labeling people. And so how do we? They
are labeling them, they prefer a certain way to be approached, and maybe we respect that. I don't understand. So I was going to actually ask this young lady to come on, because I don't understand that part of the discussion. And I'd like to know why they feel another pronoun would be better than he or she.
Because they don't feel like a he or she.
she.
Because that puts them in a binary category. And right now, one of the big things is gender fluidity. Like, for instance, I get my nails done. I just do it because I like it and I don't care.
Right.
I even had them put little Christmas trees with sparkles
Oh,
on
I
my...
didn't notice that. I have to go get mine done. Very nice.
But I do it because I like it. Like, I don't care. And there are days where I'll wear eyeliner. I almost did tonight. I was like, oh, I should put on some eyeliner and do my makeup tonight. I didn't, because I didn't really want to take the time, because it's a process, as
yes,
you
it
know.
is. Yes, it is.
But there are days like I'll very often walk out into the world with a little bit of makeup on, and we actually have stuff called now, get this, war paint. It's literally primer, foundation, concealer, and bronzer. But because they call it war paint, it's for men.
Sorry, it's not too loud for the cameras. Really?
Yes, it's called war paint for men, and it's literally just do your makeup
right.
and go out into the world and look
Right.
your best. Well, why not?
Yeah.
Like I had an employer once tell me, "Oh, you're not wearing makeup today," and I'm like, "Bet me." And I took a white napkin and I went, and they were like, "Wow, you can't even." I'm like, "That's the point, though."
Right. Well, that's if any good makeup, man or woman, you shouldn't be able to exactly tell.
Right. It's
Except when you're 77 and your eyes fail you. I walk downstairs and Bruce goes, come here. Usually it's this, you know. But anyway.
well, my favorite is one of our dearly passed away friends would draw on her eyebrows, and there were days where I was just like, "Oh, honey, your eyes are not what they used to be."
Oh,
but you know, that being said,
Yep.
whatever.
Right.
Like,
Whatever floats your boat.
and so it goes back to the pronouns. However you want to present yourself to the world, it should be your own choice. It
Right.
shouldn't be my choice to be like, you're a woman, or you're a man, or...
So my request to, and it would probably take the ad industry to do this because they seem to have the most power over culture and stuff.
Right.
Some clever ad person needs to help us get better gender pronouns
Yep.
that are less clumsy so that we just as a society make this change in the
Right.
way we address people. And if we got rid of the masculine and feminine
Right.
ways of labeling people, I think it would make a lot more people comfortable, and it would get rid of a lot of problems in society in the way things come up if we stopped labeling things.
Or not use them at all.
Just
Like
use
if we
the
didn't have to
person's name.
use...
I just realized on my Christmas cards, for some reason, a lot of my friends have lost their spouse, whether it's and I I'm never quite sure what they would want me to write, still Mrs. or Ms. or whatever, so I've just been writing Pat McDonald, and I've just dropped the Mr., Mrs., Ms., whatever.
Yep.
When I used to call my grandchildren masters, they like that. When they were
Yes,
young, master
yes.
so-and-so, they thought that was hot stuff. But maybe we just don't use it.
Well,
But I see on emails now people putting their preferred pronouns under their signature on the email, which I think is...
Like what do you mean? What do they...
we don't say preferred pronouns anymore. I got scolded about this.
Oh, what do we say?
We just say, what are your pronouns?
Oh.
Because preferred
Oh, back to the preference.
See, yeah, well,
Yes,
there you go.
so-
See, now you learned.
So we just say, what are the pronouns? But they just put, like, for instance, on a lot of name tags when you go to, in emails now, but when you go to, like, a conference, it'll just, you put your name and then you just write your pronouns. Like he, him, his, or she.
Oh, so people will
she,
know
her,
school and stuff, how
Yes.
to address
Yep,
you.
yep.
Oh, that's cool. Well, I want to ask Sophia, because she said she goes by Steve. I thought, what? But they were calling her Sophie on the show, so I don't know when she uses Steve. But I have to find out.
There's a particular story that I heard recently from a teacher who has a transgendered student, but the parents don't know, but the teachers and stuff at school know because they present at school one way and at home another way. And so whenever there's parent-teacher conferences, the student runs around and is like, don't forget, my parents don't know yet. And
whoa, that's kind of hard.
Yeah.
It's also hard for the teacher to know how to deal with
Mom and dad.
Parent teacher. That's a
Yeah.
big deal, those little meetings they have about your son or daughter.
Yeah.
All right, so
Imagine if we took gender away from what we present as a body thing. Like we just said, okay, we have a person, be it boy or
Right.
girl, but we just have a person, and then that person gets to decide what they are when they're old enough.
Well, I do disagree with parents who choose early on to do something different than what the birth would. I think that's the child's prerogative. A lot of parents do things at birth that I just think leave it alone. That may be what you want to be, politically correct on all stuff, but leave your child alone. Let them decide what they would want to be called or not.
When this was a number of years ago, but I had a neighbor who, her son went to a Waldorf school, and she told me the story of he had been kind of moping around the house this particular day, and she couldn't figure out.
8?
And he was 8 years old. He was 8 years old at the time, and moping around, and she couldn't figure out what was wrong. And she finally got him to sit down and talk. And she said, "What's wrong and what's bothering you?" And he said, "Mom, I don't know whether I'm going to marry a boy or a girl." And her response to him, she said, "You're 8 years old. It is not time for you to worry about that right now. And when it's time, you'll know." And this was a number of years ago. And I thought, like you were saying, if more parents just raised kids that way, that why as a little kid does it matter whether you're a boy or a girl? If you want to play with a doll and the next day a G.I. Joe and the next day be a cowboy and the next...
I never owned dolls, ever. I just...
Well, and that's the thing.
Never liked them.
We tend to treat girls differently than boys in parenting. And that's part of the...
Well, there's expectations, right?
Well, and
I
that's...
hate pink, just for the record. So well, there you go. And lace.
Well, and that's the thing that kills me when I see a parent say, "Oh, well, pink's not a boy color." I didn't know colors had gender.
Right.
Like, what?
Right.
That just blows my mind.
Right.
Like, because I think most men look good in a nice pink dress shirt and a gray tie or vice. Like, there's so much like with color that why do we limit ourselves and take away beauty that could be in the world?
It's what's expected. Blue for boys, pink for girls.
That's the dumbest thing
And
ever.
yellow if you're just going to...
Yellow
if
if
you're
you're
just
just
the
don't know,
neutral.
right?
Yellow and green are the two neutral colors for whatever reason.
My former son-in-law used to hate to have me come over because he used to buy at this store called Chess King. It was a guy's
Was
store.
in Burlington, yeah.
My
friend used to work there.
I would go in and buy stuff for me there. So when I was over unexpectedly and I didn't have anything for the next day, he'd go, "Here," knowing that he would never get it back because I loved the style. And I thought, well, here I am, this little pink laced person in a Chess King outfit.
I think men should have shawls. Like, there's nothing warmer than when you're sitting around your house to have a blanket or shawl over your shoulder.
Right.
Like, I think men should have shawls.
There you go. You've heard it here first. if it makes a
Fashion tips now.
Yeah, fashion tips. We start our own show, and also talking a little bit about the workplace. You've sort of been in church as a workplace and at your own inn, so that workplace discussion's a little bit. You've worked at a good company here in Vermont. I think the workplace environment makes or breaks that from either the employer or the employee, that we all have a responsibility to make it a safe place. And I had a discussion with a young man. He and his teacher were going to do the discrimination show, a racism show about black. And I noticed that the school had a Black Lives Matter flag. And I think Black Lives Matter has its original ideas of who they are sort of got waylaid.
Co-opted.
Yeah, that's a good word, co-opted. And I said, why do you, she says, because I want people, like you were saying about the flag, we want people to know it's safe here. That we fly, and the minute she said that, go fly it, I'm fine. Because I was relating it to what we know of the Black Lives Matter movement now, and not crazy about that. I was at the State House when they were trying to honor police, law enforcement, and these group of people came up, and I was, first of all, I could have been everyone's grandmother, and they were just, the hatred was just, it was horrible. So I was relating it to Black Lives Matter. So when I see the flag, I'm like, what is that supposed to be? But the teacher said, and so did the young man, that it means that everybody's safe here and they can be who they want to be. And I thought, well, that's a good thing.
So for instance, like the rainbow flag has been kind of used as the gay flag for a bunch of years.
Right.
Transgendered people, I wish I'd have brought, I have a mask that's transgendered colors, which is the light blue, pink, and white.
Right.
You know, there's all these flags. Black people, they don't have a flag. Like, they don't have something to stand behind. Right. And so for me, that's what the Black Lives Matter flag, for them, that says to me, okay,
right.
that is important because we need to understand.
Yeah.
And these people who are like, all lives matter.
Now, now they need their lives to matter more.
Not more.
That's most.
What they need is, it's not necessarily, in my opinion, more. What we as white people who have been bred into this system that's given us privilege and power, we need to understand that it's not that their lives matter more, it's that we don't treat them equally and have never.
Yeah. When I said that, I figure they said Black Lives Matter. They need right now our understanding and our recognition that their lives do matter. And when they feel that, they will then say all lives matter.
Correct.
Because they will feel like everybody else. And right now they're feeling it's their turn to, and for a long time coming, it's their turn to be in the spotlight and say their lives matter.
Yep.
But when they feel comfortable, then everybody's lives will matter, and they'll be right back where all together.
We wouldn't need a Black Lives Matter flag if all lives truly mattered.
Right.
And that's
And they're just
really where we're at
want it
right
to
now.
be their turn.
Yep.
So we have 5 minutes. I want to spend some time on the roadside, but just answer me quickly. Maybe this isn't a quick answer. My favorite person, you know me politically, but my favorite person, Senator Schumer, said he supported Biden for transgender children in locker rooms, sports, bathrooms. He just put that out today. I'm going to need a little education on this, gentlemen, because my initial reaction is no, but.
So it's supporting a person choosing.
Right. They have it.
Which bathroom they go to.
Which bathroom they go to. And they can play sports on a girls' team, or who knows? A girl can play sports on a boys' team. The bathroom thing, just because I'm 77 and it's a total privacy modesty thing for me. I don't want to deal with it. I just want to go to the bathroom.
So for me, I see it from the safety point of view, because being a gay person and using the boys' bathroom in elementary school and high school and all of that is a traumatizing thing, because boys are mean.
Right.
And
yes. Well, high school's mean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't have an option to have a safer bathroom to go to. And not that anything bad happened, but boys are just mean. And I'm sure girls are too. And so
they're catty. I don't think boys are.
Well, they have a movie called Mean Girls. Girls are mean.
Well,
so for a transgendered person, I think they should have a safe place to go to a bathroom. I personally don't understand why necessarily we need to have gendered bathrooms anyway, because we have stalls with doors, although I've heard that bathrooms in schools don't always have doors.
Yeah, they don't always, but that's an important thing, I think.
But for me, it's the safety thing.
Yeah.
And so you need a safe place to be able to go to the bathroom, or a safe locker room to change in. And that transgendered person it's the same thing where when we equated gay people with being pedophiles, so therefore you keep them away from kids.
Right.
Well, I think it's the same thing with trans people, that transgendered person is not in there checking out these other people that are going to the bathroom.
Right,
they're in there for the same reason that everyone else is in there. So I wish we didn't need to have it as a discussion, because bathrooms should just be a safe place to go no matter what.
You've never heard that point of view.
That's where I was going to go with it. If you're going into the bathroom to use the bathroom, quite frankly, I don't want to see or hear or what's going on around me.
Right.
hyper-focused
Close
on
the door.
what I need to do in
Right.
here and get out.
Right.
Especially in, first of all, I don't really care for public bathrooms at all. Like, and bathrooms with stalls.
Right.
Come on, like no.
Well, in the locker changing rooms, teenagers, I mean, I was awkward as
I
a
didn't
teenager.
like the
and
locker
what
room
teenager,
growing
how
up.
many teenagers are actually really happy to be, changing in front of
Right.
kids in
Yeah,
school?
and I think it would be ugly in high school.
I was
And
bullied
so
in our locker
imagine being
room.
a
I would,
trans
yeah.
person and put into that sort of situation. I mean, whether we...
Well, maybe they'll finally get individual places to change.
Well, that
I always hated it. I mean, I know this is hardly the comparison, but when you're 6 foot in eighth grade, man, they don't stop. I just wanted to go high.
Yep. So imagine being a trans person and
Yeah,
where,
no,
like,
I'm not comparing. I just leave.
well, everyone should have an opportunity
Right.
to be safe.
Yeah.
And
Well,
it's,
and not only that, I find it a little ridiculous that we put young people who are hitting puberty together to get,
Yeah.
and not that they're getting naked, but they're getting naked to
Yeah,
change clothes.
Taking a shower in the big.
The big open shower with several. We had one kid in 6th grade who developed way before, like he was like
Yeah.
4th or 5th grade. He was starting, and we all made fun of him because he was
looking like
a guy,
yeah.
like, and we all made fun of it. And it wasn't his fault that he matured
Right,
faster. It was
right.
just
big discussion.
yes, that's a discussion we could.
Yeah, all right, so but we're going to go a little over because I'm going to cut one or two things here when I made mistakes. But could you please talk about the Reynolds House and hoping that it hits off and gets successful and.
what would you like to know about the Reynolds House? Because I could fill an entire other
Yeah, we
program
could
just
do
talking
a
about
whole
it.
show.
I was thinking I'd like to come and do a video over there.
We would
Okay.
love to have you.
That would be
So-
great.
Anyway, it's in Barry, right on.
102 South Main Street, Barry, Vermont. Our phone number is 802-622-0201.
We'll put that up.
Our website is www.reynoldshouse1892.com.
Is this a B&B breakfast? You
Correct.
cooked?
Yes,
Not
yes.
him, right?
No, I bring
good.
water.
Just checking.
And in fact, it's one of the things I've missed most about being so closed down over this past 9 months. When we've had guests, I've remembered how much, I'm not the best morning person, but I love cooking breakfast. I love that part of the job.
That's great.
It's
It's been all renovated.
Our business tagline is Barry's place to have people over.
That's nice.
The Reynolds House was built as a single family house, finished in 1898. And when we were doing the renovations, there were big discussions on whether we kept it as a bunch of bedrooms or maybe we should open them up and make them into suites and stuff like that. We purposely kept them as individual bedrooms. Every bedroom has their own bathroom. And
Oh, that's important to me.
It's-
Speaking of bathroom.
that's even a couple
Right.
of them are small, but they all have their own bathroom. And so we can have families over
Yeah.
and everyone can have their own bedroom and their own private space, yet everyone can gather. And we couldn't do that if we had suites with kitchenettes
Well,
and stuff.
we'll bring a cameraman over and we'll do a show
We would love to have you over
because
to
we
do
want
that.
you to succeed. And there's a GoFundMe page because things are struggling, and that's.
I'll send you the link.
Oh, okay. We'll put it up on the show. So anyway, we have to close out, and I want to thank you both for coming and being so honest and open. And I thought the conversation was great. Thank you both very much. Thanks. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next week. And in the meantime, keep listening beyond the sound bites.